Hello everyone, welcome to the second session of the second part of Beyond Bohm, David Bohm and Philosophy. I'm James P. Barbieri, Associate Program Director here at the Pori Center, and I will be your host throughout this series. As a host, I'm here to help you throughout the calls, so any issues, technical or not, feel free to just let me know in the chat. Before I begin, let me just very briefly go through a couple of guidelines for this Zoom call. First, if you can please mute your microphone to ensure good quality audio, but at the same time, we do invite you all to turn on your cameras. It's nice to see everyone's faces. The chat will be open throughout the call, so if you want to share your thoughts with the group or any material, feel free to use it. As mentioned yesterday, we do now have live transcripts during these calls. You should have a live transcript button at the bottom of your screen, so you can choose the setting whether you want to see these or not there. Finally, this session is recorded for archival purposes, and for you all, you should all receive the link for these recordings in a couple of days. So great, we can now start today's session. Today we are honored to be joined again by Paavo Pylkkänen and Petteri Limnell. Petteri teaches 2 ongoing courses at the Pori Municipality Center and has worked as a consultant, teacher, tutor, and in-house philosopher at the Pori Art Museum. He also works for the Critical College of Finland and runs the Satakunta Critical College in Pori. He has also been president of the Pori Philosophical Society for 11 years, and his main interests in philosophy relate to the 3 Popper's emergent worlds. Paavo is a senior lecturer of theoretical philosophy and director of the bachelor's program in philosophy at the University of Helsinki in Finland. He is also associate professor of theoretical philosophy at the Department of Cognitive Neuroscience and Philosophy, University of Skövde, Sweden, where he initiated a consciousness studies program. He has been a colleague of David Bohm and Basil Hiley, and his main research areas are philosophy of mind, philosophy of physics, and their intersection. Today, Paavo will interview Petteri on creativity and the generative order. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Paavo and Petteri. Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say that I thank Paavo for inviting me for this session, and I also thank for the organizers to having me here. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for agreeing to be interviewed. Anyway, so as I actually maybe just a little bit of as an introduction, I as I mentioned yesterday, I know Petteri for a long time. It must have been sometime in the 1990s that you came to London, and that's where we met, and you were already doing these things. When was that? 94?
1994.
Okay, wow. So that's anyway. So and of course, and Petteri has of course also been interacting with Basil in various connections. So he's really been following this work for a long time, and also done some research and writing. And I guess at the moment, ideas also for your PhD work and those kinds of things. And so these questions that we'll be talking about, I think it's fair to say that they will connect with this book by David Bohm and David Peat, which is The Science, Order, and Creativity, which was published in 1987. And so I guess the way we will work is that I have a few slides just to maybe structure the session a little bit and give some inspiration. But then I think Petteri has been thinking about these ideas now for some time, and so we'll see how it develops, and at some stage we will also open it up for discussion. But maybe I'll start. I'll just show a couple of.
Well,
now I can't share. Let me see. Now there's something there.
Okay. Meanwhile, I could say a couple of words. It was 1992. I was studying in University of Tampere here in Finland, I was a second-year student and very fresh. And there was this national student meeting in Tampere, and the topic was creativity. So I thought that, okay, that was very interesting. So I went to the libraries and checked out the books if I could find something that I could read at that point. And then I went also to the academical bookstore in our city, and I found this book. Actually, this book in English, Science sort of on Creativity, but it was newly translated into Finnish, and Paavo was one of the translators of the book. And I picked this up and started to read it a little bit here and there, and I thought that, okay, there's really interesting stuff about creativity and all these creative orders, implicate order, generative order, and so on. I bought it and started to read, and I gave my first talk in that meeting in Tampere, and I was terrified, but it went well. And then I went to Spain to study and have a holiday, matter of fact, for half a year. And then I noticed that I still have some my Erasmus grant money left, and it was year 1994, and then I decided to go to see Paavo in London. We have a mutual friend, Matti Vaittinen, and I think he's here tonight in our sessions. And actually, Matti talked about Paavo to me and about this David Bohm, because I told Matti that have you seen this? Do you know this guy? This is David Bohm. Have you read this book? This is very interesting. And Paavo said that Matti said that yeah, he knows that Paavo is now in London, so I thought that I'm gonna go there. And we've been friends since that. It's been fun and interesting. But that's how I found this, and a couple years earlier, I heard about Bohm and Haile before, because a few years before I read this book. In English, this is called The Coast and the Atom, written and edited by B.C.W. Davis and J.R. Brown. There are something like a 50-page short introduction to quantum mechanics and its problems, and the rest of the book is about interviews. There are interviews of John Bell, Wheeler, Alan Aspect, Haile Bohm. Really nice book. I recommend this highly. So.
Okay, yeah, I have difficulty of sharing, but James, if I send you an email, you might share for me. There, we just got a few slides, so I'm sending. Did you get it? I sent it to you. It's a big file. You got it? This happens sometimes in Zoom.
Yeah, just give me 1 sec. It's just loading.
Yeah. So anyway, so the and also maybe Petteri, maybe as another part of introduction, maybe you could tell a little bit about your master's thesis in philosophy on what the idea was there, just as a get us going.
It was basically about time and consciousness and time consciousness, and basically I focused on the concept of now. And so the title of my thesis was, what was it? Hic and nunc in Latin, here and now, here and now. That was the starting point, and I started thinking about this now moment. And one of the key idea behind was that time consciousness and whatever happens at time-wise in our brains and our consciousness, this time and especially the moment now is an important feature of our consciousness. And I decided to focus on that and see that what comes out when we studied the concepts of now from point of view of metaphysics, from physics and consciousness studies. So I have this trial approach to the problem now. Of course, there's a lot more to say about it, but then it goes very difficult and technical.
Yeah, we can. So let's ask James.
Time is, of course, because it's a very important appearance in our consciousness. We thought that maybe that could be something special to and worth to study, and to see that what would come up with that when we study time and time consciousness. The question was that might something new and interesting maybe we find something new and interesting to say about consciousness from this perspective.
Now we could ask James, well, whether did you get the file and can you share that?
Sorry, it's just still downloading. Sorry.
Already, I'm sorry. I could make it smaller as well, because there's just, I think the initial picture is just very big, and we don't need that. So what I can do is
Paavo, can you send it to me? I'll share it.
Okay, but shall I leave I can leave the first, because we don't need the first picture. I think that's the one that takes
if you send
space.
it to
So
me,
I make it smaller and I'll send it to you. Just one sec.
Yeah, no problem.
So I'll send it to you. No, this is the thing with Zoom. Sometimes it just one gets into these funny modes, and it usually works, but I don't know why it doesn't work in this time. Anyway, here goes. Yeah, this is just a 2 megabytes. So here we go. Sharing. So let's see if that works better. I'm sorry about that. Just for example, yesterday it worked fine, so that's why I didn't. I didn't even bother trying it today. But somebody once explained me it's rather complicated. What do you have to do to make it work? If the sharing doesn't work, it can be there. You know, there's some maneuvers, but let's see if you can do that. Did you get it, Eleanor? Let me just sorry about this.
Do you not see the share screen button on your screen, Paavo?
I do see it, but if I do that, if I share screen, it gives me very funny options. It gives me like the drop desktop, and let me see.
Here it is.
Is this
anyway? This is from James, right?
Yeah, I think I figured it out.
Okay, very good. And so you can maybe put the next slide. Okay, so I thought we should start order. This is actually in the Wikipedia. There's a page for this book, Science, Order, and Creativity, and they are giving a short description of the content. So just to get the discussion going, I just thought we'll start with some of these things, and of course we know that order, it was very important for David Bohm, and he says that he really got interested in the notion through with the correspondence with the American artist Charles Biederman, and they've discussed, you know, some of that has been published. But I think also there were other sources. I think with Basil Hiley they discussed this a lot, and it kind of relates to the notion of structure and structuralist ideas. But anyway, so here are some the way to putting it here is the first point being all processes take place in an order with the particle order depending on context, and then there are orders of first, second, and higher degrees, and randomness can be interpreted as an order of infinite degree. Actually, our friend Matti Vaitinen pointed this out also as an answer to the question from yesterday. Somebody asked about what did Bohm think about chaos, and Matti wrote to us saying that, well, you know, some sort, at least randomness you could see as an order of infinite degree. But so Petteri, does this get you sort of started? Is there something you want to say about order before we get into the generative order and the implicate order?
Well, maybe something general. You might have touched it already yesterday, but simple addition to this introduction could be that Bohm started to heavily study these concepts of order in the context of physics. He was thinking about the differences between relativity physics and quantum physics, and he noticed that the concepts of order in both of these are very different. That relativity needed, like you said yesterday, I think you said so, causality, locality, determinism, and so on. Quantum theory seems to indicate that something completely opposite is important for quantum mechanics, and in locality and indeterminism and so on. So he started to thinking that I think that the first notion and idea was that, okay, these orders in these theories are so different. So what actually is common to them? And one common feature is the wholeness. That's what he found. And then he started to develop these different concepts of order, and he realized that maybe we need new orders in physics, that these old classical orders are not enough. Cartesian basis, it doesn't really work, and so on. So new orders are needed, and then he developed this implicate order, and then generative order followed from that.
Yes, I was also looking at this a little bit, and I think the idea of implicate order came first, but and then the generative order came later. But then I think Bohm also says that the implicate order is a particular kind of generative order. So
that's true.
The generative order would be the more general notion, but
that's right.
To get there, I think he started with the implicate order, which is specific in a way that, you know, that's where we have the whole or total order that is contained in each part.
Yeah, and that would
the
be
holographic idea.
Yeah, and that would be the special case of implicate order.
Right.
Right.
So.
Okay.
So anyway, but this is sort of how do we say, the one thing here, of course, what we can say in this definition is that order is always in some context.
Yes.
And so the I don't know if we need to go into some of these other ideas here.
Yeah, it's pretty much a similar question. Like freedom is already always in some context. You cannot have absolute freedom, because the absolute freedom will limit the freedom of others. It happens eventually. So you can be only as free as you can be without limiting the other people's freedom. So there are always contexts, and freedom is always bound somehow. And of course, we need these orders and natural laws. And if there wouldn't be any, there wouldn't be any infinite orders, really, at least any practical way, because that wouldn't make any sense. If atoms would start to jump like this and jump like that, we wouldn't be here to talk about this order.
Right. And I think I remember that they give an example here when we, we talk about the orders of first, second, and higher degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also say that the degree depends on the context and what is known and taken into consideration. So I think they give an example that you have a ball rolling down a hill where there are maybe some bumps.
Mm-hmm.
If we know all these, where the ball starts, and if we know all the bumps, then the order for us is rather low degree. We need a couple of parameters to define the movement.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't know those, what's causing those disturbances, it will appear to us as almost chaotic or almost as an infinite degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a way, I think that what they want to say there, that at least to some extent, order is in the eye of the observer, so to speak, or it depends also on us, on what we know, whether or not something appears as order or as a disorder. And
the same applies also to freedom. There are a connection between the order and freedom.
In what way?
Like they're like siblings,
Right.
because the orders are always somehow limited.
Right. But freedom in the sense, like, can you elaborate on that? Why would how would my freedom depend on, for example, what do you know about me?
What I know about you?
Yes.
Well, what I know about you is a personal, but in general terms, I can tell you that you are also bound by natural laws and social norms and all that, and laws that the societies have, and so. And as Immanuel Kant would say, we people usually we basically live in two kinds of worlds. As a physical beings, we belong to as a natural beings, physical beings, we are bound by natural laws and causality and all that. But then we are also free because we live in we have a free will, basically, at least at some degree, and we are morally free to make a judgment. And so basically we live in two different kind of worlds that seems to oppose to each other, but actually the causality, necessity and freedom, they can fit together in Kant's philosophy. But when we're talking about Bohm, like we refer to Bohm's book Causality and Chance, he also had this sort of idea there that causality and necessities and freedom and chance like events could live in the same world. It seems to be contradictory, but
how can they? I mean, can you elaborate? How can they do that? I mean, could you give an example of?
One idea that Bohm had in this book I think it was in the last chapter when he was talking about these different levels of reality, and that they fit together. There are different laws, of course, and there are some surplus here and there, but the hierarchy seems to, whether the hierarchy is a correct word here, I'm not sure, correct concept, but it seems to work very nice, actually. And Feyerabend wrote exactly, in matter of fact, a pretty nice paper out of this.
Right.
Which was according to him, part of the Bohm's philosophy of nature at the time.
Right. I guess one idea is that if we, through science, understand the laws of physics, then we can also predict things, and we know how to manipulate the world. So we know if we do this, then this will follow, and that in a way gives us more possibilities as agents, so that we can actually influence things and in a way exercise our free will, because
exactly.
Maybe people may say, I want to go to the moon, but to actually do that, then you need to know some physics. and so that you can manipulate things and get there. So in a way,
and certainly,
although there are the laws of physics, they can actually be, knowledge of them can be extremely useful. And in a way, that's the idea of science and technology, right?
Right, and you certainly need a certain amount of creativity in order to come up with these laws and understand them, you perceive them, and know that what you're going to do with them.
Right, right.
And how they're going to guide your life and your behavior. That's also a certain kind of freedom within the walls, within the orders and boundaries.
Yeah. Now the other, but of course today, if we look at today areas such as cognitive neuroscience, I mean, something we'd be looking at quite a bit. Then of course there's this notion that there is no free will, because sort of many people assume that our mental processes and even our, what we call our conscious volition is nothing but a physiological process. And then they assume that somehow these physiological processes are deterministic. They are at the classical level of physics, or somehow, there would be deterministic. And then there's this notion that our sense of free will must be some sort of an illusion. So this is, of course, another big big question, that to what extent we can have freedom. And of course, this has to do with the Libet experiments, which seem to suggest that the brain has already, if you like, decided things before I'm consciously aware of the decision.
But that's difficult.
Right. But then there are some research, like by Scherger, who is suggesting that actually even the empirical work still leaves room for kind of free will in the present. But this would be perhaps an example where we our assumptions about science seem to be in contradiction with, let's say, the notion of free will.
But there's two things. First of all, are these guys right? Are they correct? And second thing is that even those things that would be illusion, they are real for us. Just like you say yesterday, you put the stick into the water, we see that it bends. We know that it doesn't, but the experience is there. And of course, the experience can guide us. It could lead us to the wrong conclusions and wrong situations. But sometimes our free will, if I can say so, leads us to correct directions as well. Even though if it would be illusion, but it's hard to understand how my free will, if I think that I have a free will like I do, it's very difficult for me to understand that it's an illusion. It's almost the same thing to say that my consciousness would be illusion, because there are people who say that also.
Right.
But very hard to believe.
Right.
Like when you say that if your mind and your conscious decisions are nothing but the outcome of the physical and chemical brain processes, so that my thoughts, my feelings are identical with those chemical physical processes, it's also very difficult to understand. It might be true, but there is this gap.
Right. And of course, that's what I've always been interested in the case of Bohm, is that because he has this notion of soma significance. So in a way, that is one thing that is saying that somatic or configurations carry meaning.
Right.
And in a way, meaning depends on matter. In that sense, there's this soma, it's the typically material energetic processes that are meaningful to us. But once there is the meaning, then it can kick back. That can actually organize physical process. And this kind of idea is it's not very common in, let's say, in cognitive neuroscience. I think people just don't have these kinds of theoretical principles. They're just assuming that there's the brain and, the mind is dependent on it. And that's pretty much it. That, there's no genuine, what we call mental causation. And so that's one of the example.
Yeah, I understand that the problem, but it's nice that you pick it up once again, because I've always liked your version of Bohmian highly active information, because if the causal is closed, and if there's outcomes, effects, and there's always a physical cause behind them. So the idea, why couldn't this active information inform this closed system anyway? I mean, the system could be whatever it is. Let it be as material, physical as it is, but it could be informed. Why not?
Right.
I mean, if quantum potential and active information have that sort of property, that would be awesome. Because
Right.
you know, idea that I raised my hand, that it's only physics. It doesn't really make sense, because I make a conscious decision to raise my hand. So it could be that my conscious decision informed this process. It took part of it somehow by informing it. It's almost like a weak measurement, you know. It doesn't go into the causal system so deep, but it informs it.
Right.
Does that make any? Well, I think that this is one of your
no, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think sort of sorting out, if you like, if we are also sorting out sort of Bohm's philosophical contributions, I definitely think that there's this idea of meaning being a kind of active and perhaps able to organize physical process is sort of radically different from the mainstream physicalism, where we somehow feel that there's the physical machinery, which is fairly mechanical, that's just going on. And then these things like meaning are more like epiphenomena, which are maybe, you know, caused by these physical processes, but they do not kick back, so to speak. They don't have any autonomous powers. So I guess it's maybe even good. It was, I don't know whether it was lucky that Bohm didn't read too much philosophy of mind, because then maybe he was able to think more freely, or just, you know, come up with his own idea of the way it works.
I agree 100%.
Right.
I agree with that.
Right.
Once again, if the physical would be causally closed, and if the world would be deterministic fully, which is not fully deterministic, but mostly like some part of quantum physics is deterministic for sure, then where does the creativity come in?
Right. Shall we move into the move forward? Maybe we could have the next slide, please. And this is again just a summary from the wiki page, and this was what we have, the generative order and the implicate order, and this is actually just telling what Bohm and Pete do in the book, and so there are all these areas where they apply these notions. There's like mathematics, art, science, and then even in experience. And let's go to the next slide. And because I think, Petteri, you mentioned this one, do you want to talk about this these pictures?
Yeah, okay. So now we are talking about generative order, and we are talking about the generative process. And this process that we're going to see here, it's actually pretty simple, but at the same time very powerful, because it gives us a intuitively very clear picture that what this generating process looks like, how it looks like. And let me just take you here step by step. So once you have you have a simple like this first triangle there, you have this simple figure, and if you apply this figure again and again and again, then you have a star like this in the middle of the picture. So you add this generative factor into each side of the object, and you keep doing that all the time. The dimension get also, of course, smaller and smaller all the time, but eventually you have these very interesting new objects, and these new objects will have a new surprising mathematical new mathematical features. that perhaps were pretty surprising to find. And I always thought that could this generative model here could be used as a kind of model of creativity, simply because these new mathematical properties that emerge are quite surprising. At least I think that they are pretty surprising. If Haile wants to comment on these mathematical processes, for example, like a sense that how surprising they are actually, if they are. I would like to ask Haile's opinion about that.
Well, I once went, oh, sorry, can I come in now?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
please.
Yeah, I once was invited to a IBM meeting. And there was a guy there who was talking all about this.
Mhm.
And he showed some amazing landscapes, which you could actually generate out of fractals, which were quite amazing. I think they may, in fact, be in Mandelbrot's book, but they really are very intriguing. And I'm rather intrigued with them because the Feynman diagrams are essentially fractals.
Right.
And they have Hausdorff dimension, I forget what it is, 2 point something. So that this suggests that in fact fractals do play a role at the very basis of quantum mechanics, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is very important, but I'm not sure anybody has taken it very far apart from just saying, "Oh, isn't that interesting?" At least not to my knowledge.
This is very interesting also because in a sense that if this fractals and fractal mathematics and geometry is important in quantum physics, and if and only if this shows us some inceptions concerning creativity, then might this same creativity play some role in quantum mechanics if this whole thing plays a role in quantum mechanics? I mean, can we have a creative physics?
Yeah, but please, this is very speculative, so don't take this
Right.
as standard. Okay, but the essential point is that it emerges out of something that I keep stumbling over when I'm digging down into the foundations of quantum mechanics, and that is that derivations, your ordinary derivatives in space and time, are not the same as they are, as we've been taught in our A level, degree level. They're not like the continuum. There's a forward derivative and a backward derivative, and you've got to be so careful how you string them together. So there's something very deep going on in the fundamental process, and they could very well be fractal-like. And I've been talking to Tim Palmer about this, and he certainly believes very strongly in, he's the man who was in charge of the Meteorological Office weather forecasting. So he knows about fractals because he uses them quite a lot in weather forecasting, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And he feels that that when we come down to the very small, you have to take into account this idea of some sort of fractality at the very low dimensions, very small dimensions.
And also, I think in larger dimensions, because you can use the this fractal geometry and mathematics and model mountains, clouds, all sort of these things that are, you know, almost impossible to model with classical geometry. And it's been said that these fractal geometry is actually a little bit closer or more closer to the actual geometry of nature than the Euclidean classical geometry.
Sure, but if you hear me talking, my talk is always concentrating on the very small because I'm absolutely fascinated with quantum theory.
Yeah, but also very small could be quantum-like. I think that's it. Yeah. But yeah. This, in any case, this fractal, this process of generating these interesting new features might serve as a kind of at least some sort of introductory guideline to the idea that what creativity could be, how it could come up. And we will see later that what kind of role this general order have in different areas. Bohm have very important and interesting examples in his book. He's talking about language and music and art and all that very extensively. Some of these examples are actually pretty difficult to follow, especially concerning the works of art. But then there are easier ones, of course, like certain mathematical ones. There was these waves. You start with one wave, you take a similar wave and change the phase, and you will have all sort of new kind of waves. And this happens through the process of generative order. You just generate this and use this broader order, and you come up with new things that you didn't have before. And it serves as at least tentatively as a model of creativity, because when we're talking about creativity, well, it's hard to define what creativity is. It's hard to find what originality is, but we can always say that, you know, in simple terms, that when we're talking about creativity, we're talking about something new, something original, something valuable, and something different, of course, new and different are almost equivalent terms.
Can we have the next slide, moving on to just an example of how generative order works in biology? So there, that's also from the book Science of Creativity. But Petteri, do you want to say something about this?
Let me first read what you have written here. These diagrams, taken from Goethe's original researches on morphology, illustrates the nature of the dynamical movement inherent in the Urpflanz. Two particular leaves are linked by a series of transformations that originate from deeper generative movement. So the idea is that there is no really any example of Urpflanz per se, but the key idea is that all these different shapes of these leaves are linked into the very same source of generative order, that it's the basis of this sort of structures. Would that do?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think you.
The idea here is that
forward.
I'm sorry.
I think James, you went to the next slide, but you can still be here. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, the key is that these originate not from anything specific. There's no specific plant that produces these. That's not the case. The idea is really here that they originate from the deeper generative movement there behind these appearances, where this hierarchy, or not necessarily hierarchy, but series of different forms comes through the creativity. They open up there from the generative process.
Yes. Now, of course, these days we would look at this. If we think of these plants as the explicate order, then we might think of the DNA molecule as the implicate order, and of course then at least some of the variations we can link to the genetic code. And of course, that is a subtle question to what extent it happens in each particular case, but that's of course then somewhere where this creativity could also operate. I mean, of course, the mainstream view has for long been that we have random mutations in the DNA, and then we have natural selection, and so. But of course, in the case of Bohm, the randomness, the question is, well, what do we mean by randomness? And he would still say that that's a subtle issue. It depends of all the all the factors that actually come into it. So if you would take more and more of the context, and of course today we have things like epigenetics. So there are issues where actually even external circumstances can actually affect the gene. So a kind of some Lamarckian elements have been there in the discussion, and there's some.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yes.
And so of course that would be one way of trying to get into this. But anyway, I mean, this is another. Of course, Bohm did write about philosophy of biology as well. I mean, and I don't know if anybody. I have one PhD student in Helsinki, Markus Beckström, and we've been. He works on, he's a biologist, and we've been thinking of we should actually look into this work on biology, but we haven't done it yet. But anyway, so
yeah, very interesting. I remember there were some symposiums or conference back in the 70s.
Right. In the 60s.
Petteri Limnell and Bohm were writing about the philosophy of biology and wondering, for example, whether the mutations are always chance-like, or whether they could be some order in the series of mutations. So those were very interesting papers. And this context of biology also makes me wonder. There is still all these morphological problems in philosophy. I'm sorry, in biology. And last time when I checked, one important and intrigue question and problem is that when you have stem cells here, and this group of stem cells start to build my fingernail, and identical stem cells start to build my right leg. How does that happen? I mean, last time when I checked, I found that this is a still fundamental problem in biology.
I think it's assumed that it's a contextual, that there is this sort of contextual that determines it. So again, it's the role of context that comes into it, that whatever is being, if you like, you get the implicate order, and then whatever is actualized, it depends on the context. So that's, I mean, but of course that's just a general principle. To actually show at the nitty-gritty level how it works, it's not a easy problem, but I read recently this pretty cool book. I mentioned this yesterday. This is a pretty cool book on biology. It's a popular book, but it's written by a specialist, and I think there are some ideas about that, but it's not that everything is solved. But this book, I think I could highly recommend to anybody who's interested. It's a critical and informative, and there's a personal element there as well. So I enjoyed that a lot. It's by Mukherjee. I can put it in the chat. But shall we? What is there? Before we open it up for general discussion, are there some issues that you want to talk about still? We are now about 10 to 8, but.
Do I still want to talk? Yes.
Yes, because I have one slide which is more talking about what a reviewer thought was the message of the book Science, Order, Creativity, but we could talk about that a little bit, but then we can also move on. Say a little bit about this. It's interesting because it's by Detlef. This is a review written by Detlef Dürr. Actually, the Wikipedia page has a reference to it. And Detlef Dürr, of course, he was one of the gang, which is the more if you like, the hard line version of so-called Bohmian mechanics. And I was actually surprised when I read his review, because he appreciates highly Bohm and Pete's book, although in some ways it's not his style, and he works in another way. But this is more like just summarizing this. And I was wondering, is there anything here that would you would like to take up?
Let me see. First sentence: free your mind from dogma, structures, and preconceptions. Well, that's of course one theme that Bohm have in this book when he's talking about the obstacles for creativity, and what kind of obstacles we have. So in this sense, first line is spot on, of course, because these dogmas and paradigms, for example, everything that you have learned, everything that have become rigid in your community or your society, and all that will restrict your freedom and your creativity. And of course, if you want to practice your creativity, because we should understand that creativity is a fundamental potential in us. It's a fundamental feature of who we are, actually. Because we all are creative. Bohm says that everybody's potentially creative, and if you look around the world, just look around. This is amazing. We live in a world of creativity. All these things, services, inventions, everything are products of creativity. Even the guys who figure out the electromagnetism and all that, and behind that there's Ørsted, Schelling, Maxwell, all these guys. Then somebody comes up with a computer. That's awesome. Somebody's a great computer user, a hacker, is brilliant and creative in that. And then there are the rest of us who just use it and enjoy what it brings. And this is also part of creativity. That experience per self can be creativity. If you look at, contemplate a great work of art, listening to music, you don't have to produce anything, but your experiments might be very creative and make you feel happy and healthy. And that's the whole point. When we are creative, we are happy and healthy.
Right.
And that's very important for individual and society as well.
Right. But of course, then there's the question of freeing our mind from dogma, structures, and preconceptions. So that's of course the difficult part. And I think something, what Bohm and Pete bring up in the book is that actually even in science we do see a lot of dogma, structures, and preconceptions. Although in a sense, science is meant to be the search for truth, and in that sense, we have criticism because in order to question our ideas and all that. But of course, it doesn't always work like that. And so this is something where I think Bohm himself, he was thinking a lot about these things, as we know. I mean, and of course, this connects to this whole notion of dialogue, where
exactly
suspending your assumptions is part of perhaps not being so dogmatic, because then it makes you're able to listen perhaps in a better way.
Yeah, this is a problem of communication, and dialogue could be certain kind of medicine for that. But then again, you must learn something about the dialogue to be able to engage into this dialogue in order to learn something new. But you need to have an open mind, and of course, to be creative, to get something done, and especially to get something done together, because there's also a lot of creativity in processes of doing something. And when you have a collective, for example, an art collective, it's amazing what these kids and these people can do together when they are in open dialogue and they have this common pool of information thing going on. You could see and experience an amazing thing if you have these Bohmian positive things going. Absolutely.
Yeah, anyways, are there other things you want to take up from the list, or
just a minute? Discussions, but remember that. Okay, no, well, it went away. Can you get it back?
Yeah, sorry about that. It can't seem to be able to. Sorry about this. One second.
Zoom is more clever than we are.
Big discussions, yes, but remember the listening is your main role. If you seek the road to understanding, yeah, that means that you have to be open to listen other people and try to understand what they are saying instead of just forcing your own ideas into the system, into communication. Of course, remain open to other points of view. Like Bohm says that, and many other people, of course, says that it's important to even consider these other points of view. You don't have to accept them, but you must try to understand them and be open to them, because you never know how these could change also from your view or whatever you can come up together with this discussion or meeting that you have.
And I think, yes, yeah, I think this is there. I think it connects to also what Bo would say, that meaning is the crucial thing, that we often disagree with something without understanding it properly, or we just find it so appalling or difficult. And I think in this interpretation of quantum theory, one can see that very well, because they take something like the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Now, some people love it for whatever reason. It could be, psychological reasons or whatever, and that others just find it no way. I mean, so it's beyond the limits of what can be, and there even somebody might argue, well, people got inspiration. Maybe David Deutsch was inspired to develop ideas from quantum computation because he took seriously the many worlds. So it could have perhaps even have instrumental value in some ways for part of creativity. But I think it's interesting that Bohm and Hailey, they do have a chapter on the many worlds interpretation in their book. And in a way, and at least I think some people feel that it's a fair reading of it, or at least trying to understand, and then perhaps pointing out, well, these are the problems with the approach, and so we could have this kind of discussion. And as we know, this hasn't always been easy, because when I started with following the philosophy of quantum mechanics in the 80s, I think things were pretty dogmatic. We went to the conferences, and there were still a lot of, especially, of course, we know that people didn't want to listen to Bohm's ideas because they were not part of the Copenhagen. Some of that is maybe still there. I mean, Basil knows about this, but perhaps it has changed a little bit over the years now. But that's just as an example.
Right. Now the can you put it back?
We just lost James. We just lost James a moment with the slides. So if you guys, you'll be back in a moment, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah.
It's very much the what you mentioned. Bohm is talking about this. What is this shared meaning that we need to try to come up together? We have to be able to find ways to share meanings that could be a starting point.
You don't like the meanings, or sort of. This is of course the it's easy to say, but it's difficult to do.
Right. But you could always try to find a common ground and start from there.
Right.
because anyway, in quantum mechanics, there are, of course, there are lots that people do agree.
Right, right. Let's see, there's not that much in the slide. There's one more slide which might take us to but Eleanor, do you have the slides or?
There was a lot of interesting points.
Okay,
so.
now we got it there. Yeah.
So
So do you? Yeah. Do you want to see?
Yeah, bear in mind that no single concept or value can be considered absolute or superior. I think that Bohm underlies this, and Bohm and Beat underlies this absolutely. If being useful is beneficial, then being useless is also beneficial. Okay. Wait a minute. If being useful is better, then being useless is also beneficial. I'm not quite sure whether I understand that how being useless is also beneficial, but perhaps we could.
There is also maybe, you know, he's putting it poetically.
All right. There is no absolute in anything, so the search for the absolute is futile. Agreed? While the search for understanding is not agreed. And, you know, this reminds me, Bohm was talking about these levels of implicate order, super implicate order, and all these depths in universe, immense seas of, and the depths of generative orders and concept. You were talking about concepts of unlimited and all this. Many times indicating that the universe might be, you know, infinite in its depths and concerning its qualities. This is of course metaphysics, but it sounds very interesting. And this also reminds me that because a lot of people think that there are some sort of atoms in a literal sense now, atoms being the quarks, and a world can be built from these little building blocks. But of course, Bohm and Hailey do not endorse this view as all. At all, they see world more as an organismic, like almost life-like a thing, and being very creative in many ways.
The emphasis we put is on process, not on objects.
Right. That's
maybe
right.
we can have the last slide, which is kind of connects to that one.
Yeah. Okay.
This is from Bohm.
Okay. Is this it?
This would be the final, my final slide, just for the stimulate the discussion, but it kind of connects to what Basil just said. So that's why I think it's a good moment to take it up.
Okay. My attitude is that the mathematics of the quantum theory deals primarily with the structure of the implicate free space, and then I can see what there is, how an explicate order of space and time emerges from it, rather blah, 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 with movements, physical.
I can read it if you can see that.
Okay, yeah, please.
So, okay, so this is from Bohm. It's written in 1986, and there's the article called.
Yeah, I know. This is a great paper. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he says that my attitude is that the mathematics of the quantum theory deals primarily with the structure of the implicate pre-space and with how an explicate order of space and time emerges from it, rather than with movements of physical entities such as particles and fields. And he added there that this is a kind of extension of what is done in general relativity, which deals primarily with geometry and only secondarily with the entities that are described within this geometry. And this connects to, yesterday I was saying that in contemporary philosophy, there's this thing called ontic structural realism, where they say that, you know, when you think about what there is, structure is more important than furniture, you know, furniture being the objects. And in a way, here we can see quite clearly that at least in some parts, Bohm was actually emphasizing this. But there's also a dynamic, like maybe Basil can comment this, but there's a dynamic aspect here because there's also the notion of space and time emerging from pre-space as some sort of a dynamic process.
Well, the basic idea is that we start with movements, not of objects, but of a general flow, a general activity. And then from piecing together those general flows, we find the invariants of that structure. And then those invariants become the atoms. And from that, we can then construct space and time. That's the overall picture, as it were, which is very different.
So is it so that space and time come with the particles and the fields, or?
Yes, it emerges from that. You can define entities which have space-like features and time-like features.
And how is this related to general cosmology?
Yeah, give me a chance. This is just starting at the bottom. This is what Penrose is also, Roger Penrose is trying to do with his geometrizing quantum mechanics. Rather than quantizing gravity, this particular approach tries to gravitize quantum mechanics, if I can use that word. I think he uses that word, actually. So we're coming in from a different point of view. We're saying that he's saying geometry, I'm saying structure process. When I first started working with David way back, far too far back to remember, the idea was that we were trying to develop a theory of structure process. And we had to try to order this structure process. And that's where the idea of order came from in the first place. And from this order, get relationships. From relationships, you get structure. From structure, you get space and time. But sorry, that is a very succinct description, which will take me 4 hours to explain in detail.
No, thank you. Yes.
How much there are dynamical features in this scheme of yours?
It emerges. The whole idea is to merge from these fundamental processes. This is what I was inspired by a book by Richard Feynman way back in the 60s, which was called Fundamental Processes. And he tried to understand quantum theory using the notion of a fundamental process. Now, the problem is, what do you mean by a fundamental process? Well, this is part of the minimum vocabulary, unfortunately. It's the same as, what do you mean by an atom? In the Greek sense of the word, atom was simply something that you couldn't divide. Not consisted of quarks and partons and all the other gizmos that we've discovered since then. So the fundamental process is something which cannot be divided. So the way you think about it is that it really depends upon 2 points. So rather than dealing with the mathematics of just 1 point functions, which you can differentiate with ease, you think of 2 point functions, the start and the finish, if you like. So that's the process. And then you've got to worry about how you do differentials when you're dealing with extended objects. I'm exaggerating when I say that, but you then let them go to the limit and you investigate that limiting process.
Can you apply? Yes, do you want to continue? Or?
Well, I'm just saying that is the way you then connect up.
All right. Can you apply this unfolding implicate process?
Yes, it comes directly from that, because you then find yourself in the idea of a Clifford algebra. Now, this was invented by Clifford, would you believe it, in 1870 something. He didn't know what quantum mechanics was. He was just thinking about activity how do you get things out of process?
Right.
And his idea was to say that let's have a look at mathematics. Mathematics is really about process. Normally we say it's an abstract 3 times an abstract 2 gives me 6. But he said, no, think of it as the 3 becoming doubled. You see the activity of doubling, or the 2 becoming 3 is trebling. So you've got an activity in there. And then you say, all right, if I'm in the desert and I'm using this idea, how do I navigate through the desert? I go so many direct straight line, then I turn right for so much, then I turn left again. So I essentially am describing a Feynman path of getting me through this.
And now I think we lost.
I guess we lost Basil. Okay. Anyway, so, but I'm also wondering at this point, it's turning past whether we should open it up to the general discussion and take questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the issues with the sharing of the screen. Hopefully it's all been resolved now. But yeah, if you'd like to ask a question or make a contribution, you can use the raise your hand function on Zoom, which can be found in the reactions at the bottom of your screen. Otherwise, you can always type your question in the chat and I can read it out for you. So we had Steve, who earlier raised his hand. So please do come in.
Hello, thanks for taking my question. I'd like to start off first. I have a question and then I'll have another question. But my general question is for Paavo. Yesterday, watching a session in which you mentioned that Bohm felt rejected in a way. He didn't want to be a physicist anymore, quote unquote. That's my general statement about that. But because that scientists weren't interested in meaning. And when you said that, there was a audio kind of glitch, and it sounded like you were saying that they weren't interested in me, Bohm, but you were saying meaning. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I think he at that point, I don't know. I think he in the 80s, when I was interacting with him, he did feel that his 52 theory had somehow not been treated properly. So that was kind of important for him. But I think it wasn't so much, I think it was more like his general, it just the way he responded to what was going on in the conference. So it wasn't about him, it was about the other people in that particular occasion.
And since we've been talking, find it very, very interesting about meaning. And I'm going to take off just a little take off from where you guys are as an artist, and we're talking about creativity. So I would like to say that there's a potential for meaning to be much more fundamental with the material than what is given credence to. And in a way that I could look at it is that, first of all, mathematics and a painting, or let's say a mathematical formula, the creative process for a mathematical formula, mathematics in general, the mathematical arena, if you will, is very similar to a painting in the art arena. The same creative processes are involved in making either one of those, and both the artistic arena and the scientific arena are making creative representations to describe what reality is. So in thinking along those lines, and if we look at a painting, if we took a painting could basically be seen as a a series of marks, series of brushstrokes on a cloth and wood, etc. And if we were to try to discover the meaning of the painting or what the painting is in any arena, and we study brushstrokes, and we could study the brushstrokes in terms of chemistry, we could study the brushstrokes in terms of color, vibration, we could study the canvas, etc., but we would never get to the meaning of the painting that is intended by the artist. In the same way, it'd be like studying the ink in a mathematical formula versus the actual formula. So couldn't meaning be much more fundamental? And perhaps, and I'm projecting here, so I don't know this, but perhaps that's what Bohm was beginning to see, especially when you look at sum of significance and the bridge being meaning, that perhaps meaning somehow entices the material to come into existence, or to at least be organized enough to be functioning with meaning. And I was wondering, and I'm relating that to basically the painting being a stand-in for any kind of material, any kind of explicated material, object, or even a particle. I was wondering if you could maybe react to that.
I think that in their book, Bohm and Beat, they address this question a few times. And one of the things that they say that when you're observing or contemplating a piece of art, they say that something like this, that the object that you are looking at, the art that you are contemplating, it leads you to a similar kind of idea that the artist might have had in his mind when he did this painting. And the idea behind it is this, that this generative order process opens up when you're able to look the work of art in a certain way.
Right.
So in a certain sense, you can never get the absolute meaning out of the artwork, in a sense that whatever it was, that was what artist was thinking, but the work might lead you towards that sort of meaning that the artist might have had in his mind.
Right. But how does that translate to, say, the particle? Basil was talking about, which I agree with the overall notion that it's really about the process. So at the point of process, art is not considered very much in the realm of being able to. Nobody listens to artists or studies paintings or studies meaning in a way that would actually inform the physics, quantum or otherwise, of the overall situation. And meaning and artists are basically on the back seat. So and in fact, artists are studying creativity. And what does and there's an association with meaning and consciousness. So is the need for consciousness or meaning creating some of what we see physically in terms of physics? Anyway, that was my basic idea.
Can I take? Oh, Petteri, can I take it?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Sorry, I got cut off, but my internet went dead in the middle of a sentence. That's why I disappeared. No, the idea is that when Bohm and I were talking about the structure process idea way back, was that it was more like an impressionist artist painting. Our elements of process were, if you like, the brushstrokes, but we had certain rules of how you can put the brushstrokes together to create a structure which was not just slapdash. And it was that structure that led us to the ideas, led us directly to quantum mechanics, if you put the right structure on. So in a sense, you're right, but we were trying to get the meaning of ordering them in this particular way. It wasn't a mechanical order. It was much more of a creative order, which changed the way we thought about it. In other words, we were changing the meaning of the actual formalism. So it's in that sense that the meaning, and then more generally, nature itself, in order to structure itself that way, responds to the meaning of the process within the general context. That was roughly the idea.
So following the physical process or the physical structure, then meaning.
Well, when you're an artist, you're following some structure. I mean, I don't quite know what art. I'm talking about the Impressionists.
Right.
It's like an Impressionist painting. I don't know whether that.
No, I know about that that analogy, by the way.
Okay. But
thank you.
I just wonder if that helps you to see
yes, it does.
what it is we were trying to do.
No, I do. And in fact, that's part of the reason why I'm trying to push it a little bit further in terms of meaning being more foundational than even what has come about in Bohm's.
Yeah, but we've got two problems. We've
Hmm.
got a mathematical structure. We can't do anything with the structure. It's not random. This is one of the problems that I wanted to come in on, but I thought I'd better be quiet. It's not random. It may look random, but I can explain why it looks random, but that's another story.
Okay.
So we've got that discipline, as well as reproducing the experimental results. So we've got, we're really tight. Whereas, I don't know whether I'm right because I'm not an artist, but does the artist have the same constraints?
But there's an almost opposite goal in terms of the scientific process, which is looking for repeatable results. An artist is actually looking for a singular, unique, original result in the end.
But
right?
We're still looking for new results.
True.
We're sticking our neck out and saying, this is true, we should see this in the laboratory.
But we
now,
don't.
That's the difference.
Right. We don't go to see, can we reproduce this painting again? We're looking for a totally unique end result. But I understand exactly what you're saying, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, for coming in. For those who weren't here for the first part of Beyond Bohm, Steve was one of the speakers with Lee Nickel. But thank you, Steve, for attending this session as well.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Chris.
Hello. I'm interested in the creativity and as it connects to the generative and implicate order and how it comes out of that, or how novel things come out of that. My understanding of creativity is that it's something novel is being created by adding something new to what either has come before or that exists in this moment. And that then is novel, that's moving forward. And that's being generated out of the generative order from the implicate order. I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but that it comes out of the implicate order when as a creative effort. and that creativity is sort of the principle of generating something new that then appears in the explicate order from the implicate order. My question, if I'm getting this correct, is then if the implicate order is a closed system, is that then just epistemologically new? Is that epistemological creativity as opposed to ontological creativity? It's not really ontologically a novel new thing because it's already in the implicate order and it's coming out of that, and it's new to us, or it's new to reality, or it's new to the explicit order. But so it's just in that way, in some ways, it's more deterministic. It's all of the things like creativity and free will is epistemologically creative as opposed to ontologically creative. That's my dilemma on understanding how this is coming out.
Yeah, well, if I start, I think that the implicate order is a little bit, there's no real emergence from implicate order. It's epistemic. It's not ontological. It's implicate order is not that creative process at all, as far as I understand it. I think that it was Prigozhin who, in one of his papers, criticized also the implicate order in the sense that it doesn't really produce anything new, that because everything is there in the implicate order already. So implicate order may not be that creative as Bohm wished it to be, but it might be different thing with the generative order. But maybe Basil could comment.
You're almost there. You're almost there. The idea of the generative order came after the implicate order,
right?
And that was to open it up for novelty to come in.
Yeah. Is this Chris okay for you, or do you want to talk more about?
So, well, it's still then. So the generative order is generating the novelty.
Yeah.
By combining, so is that then still just epistemologically creative, or?
No, it's ontologically creative. It's an open system. It's an open system.
So that's the open system.
That's the open system.
I see.
The implicate order is a closed system.
Okay, so
I
have to understand the generative order better.
The generative order is necessary to make the thing an open system.
Okay.
If you have any technical knowledge, the implicate order is really the von Neumann algebra of type 1. The generative order comes in von Neumann algebras of type 2 and 3. But that might not mean anything to you. But
that part of it, not really. But I think I'm getting what you're moving towards, and that clears a lot up for me. It's the generative order that I have to learn more about, and how that generates the novelty.
Yeah, Bohm did not spend enough time on that.
So this is why people tend to think that he's deterministic when not really deterministic, because the implicate order in some ways could be considered deterministic because it's closed. But the generative order is what ontologically what generates the creativity. Opens it up. Got it.
And
that makes me feel good.
Yeah, and the ontological creativity in generative order is a different thing that ontological emergence. It's not the same thing. Because most of the emergent things that we have in reality are epistemic, meaning that has to do with ignorance more than anything else. We had like crystals. We have the continued radiation of sun. All these things, and classical physics couldn't explain. So these were emergent features back then. But when the quantum theory came, all these things we were able to explain them. So we realized that they are not ontologically emergent, only epistemic. emergent. And the good question is that is everything in the universe more or less epistemically emergent? Because the radical version of ontological emergence would mean that there wouldn't be a true theory, and there couldn't be any true theory from where we could deduce certain things like, let's put in an abstract way, X, Y, Z. If we couldn't have that sort of theory from where we could derive these things, and if we can't not reduce back to them anything, then we say that these entities are ontologically emergent. Do I make myself clear? Or
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
because and this sort of ontological emergence would be, in matter of fact, kind of a mystical thing, because nothing contacts it to any previous creatures or entities or whatever you have. It's like a jump,
right?
From nothing. But that would be a radical form of ontological emergent. But it's a little bit different than the ontological creativity in generative order.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming in. The next question, I'd like to read one from the chat, which comes from Sue, who asks, could you please speak to the statements on pages 208 and 209 in Science, Order and Creativity that speaks to the risks of the generative orders of societies leading towards their ultimate demise, if there becomes a rigid, fixed perspective and lack of creativity? She attached a quote, which I'll just share with you now. It's becoming caught up in the false process of a destructive generative order, as described above, has been the ultimate fate of all known civilizations. What is needed is not simply a new creative surge, but a new order of creative surge, one that extends into science, culture, social organizations, and consciousness itself. I'll leave that for a second, and I can take it off. But yeah, if you could please speak on these statements, that's the question.
Is this directly from the Bombs and Beats book?
I think it is, maybe edited, like some parts cut out.
Yes, where the dotted lines are, it's separated by some other text.
Okay. The false process of destructive generative order, all right, as described above as being the ultimate fate of all known civilizations, all right. What is needed is not simply a new creative surge. What is needed is not simply a new, okay, but we do need this new creative wave, something like Renaissance have. Creative search, but a new order of creative search, one that extends into science, culture, social organization, and consciousness itself. Yes, it has to be. It has to concern all these. I mean, I wish that the person who had this could elaborate a little bit of what he or she had in his mind.
Sure. Thank you for taking the question. Yeah, it's a part of the book I've underlined and highlighted because I think it's so crucial to what's been talked about today in terms of what the natural evolution of a generative order in a culture is destined to happen if the culture itself doesn't recognize its own fixed perspectives. And what we saw on the slide about all those premises that are really enfolded into David Bohm's dialogue work, the openness and not assumptions and stuff, all of that seems like it's connected to this page, because if those things are not happening, ultimately the society will self-destruct. And it seems very pertinent to today's world. And so I was just interested in your thoughts about this as it relates to the importance of creativity, and what does creativity need to look like in today's world to avert that evolution?
Yeah, good question. Bohm and Pete, they referred to, for example, Renaissance world, and started to look things from there. That was one perspective that they have there. And this is a very good one, because in Renaissance culture, the creative wave concerned the whole society, everything that there was. Life sciences, society, art, everything. So what we really need is according to the authors, we need this new kind of wave of creativity, but how to come up with that, that's of course, I can't answer that. I'm sorry, but you do understand that this is quite a big question to answer. But yeah, but what happens to the societies? They come and go, like everything else. They unfold and fold. They decay and regenerated and everything like that. That happens all the time. And this will happen to our cultures as well. Look at the problem.
Sorry, Petteri, it is actually happening to our culture at the moment. I'm sorry to say.
At the moment, because of all the problems that we have, we generate actually more and more problems. We can't solve them creatively. We have lost this creative course in our societies and lives. Totally. We are against each other. We can't cooperate almost in any level.
We're back in the 30s, I'm afraid. And you know what that ends in.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Unfortunately, yes.
I'm sorry, I don't know what to do about it. It just seems impossible. You can philosophize as much as you like, but if the man in the street has made up his pig-headedness, I don't know what to do. Sorry.
I'm sorry to agree, but hard to add anything to this. But well, of course, we have to try our best.
Well, you are the youngsters. You've got to do it. You're youngsters.
We have to. We can't.
I've had my life.
It's not an option. We have to try our best and do everything that we can. Whether it works or not, but giving up is not an option.
I'm looking forward to all you youngsters doing something about it.
There's actually a follow-up to Sue's question in the chat, which is, how would you compare that to historicism, the idea that society is naturally unfolding or going towards some kind of more ordered or enlightened destiny, an idea which Karl Popper famously criticized?
Sorry. It's serious, but I can't keep a straight face. I don't know. Come on, you philosophers, help us out.
Yeah. Sorry, sorry. The last question got me thinking a little bit into different directions. So, who asked that question? By the way, can
It was John Kumek.
Okay, and the key of the question was that, and can you please repeat it?
Yes, of course. Sorry.
Because I got lost.
Well, would John like to ask it?
Sure. It's basically just comparing the idea of generative order related to society in comparison to the idea of historicism, where society is kind of going towards a more enlightened future. I'm just interested how people would kind of connect those ideas, or how can you have the idea of a generative order in relation to society that doesn't become historicism? Unless it is historicism, I don't know. I was just interested in kind of general thoughts on that.
Does this question means that how you can keep the creative juice flowing and going on in society? Is that the same thing? Is that what you're asking?
I don't know. It was more along the lines of, like, Sue's question is talking more about generative order in relation to society as opposed to physics. So it just conjured the idea of historicism, that there's, you know, this kind of like natural progress to society towards kind of a more enlightened idea. And Karl Popper famously criticized that we don't necessarily, you know, as has been mentioned, we don't necessarily, we aren't necessarily going towards a more enlightened future, or perhaps maybe we are, and this is just like a blip in the road. You know, when we go through these kind of like dark ages, maybe on the course of geological time span, you know, we're, you know, we are still moving kind of towards a more, you know, a better order for society.
You think so?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what to think on that.
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting question, but a very difficult question to answer, because we don't know the forces at work in society in general. That's the problem.
Yeah, and this is
I think we do. I think we do.
Okay, give us a solution.
Well, we have to start with some sort of historical events that are generated over the times. We can go back to 80s, early, late 70s. We can talk about new liberalism and all that, and generate these ideas. We can find the generative sources of many of these things that drive contemporary society.
Yeah, but that came at the end of a horrible war where there was nothing. I grew up in that age. I sat on a bus going through London and seeing the devastation. And there was a tremendous surge of hopefulness that we were really going somewhere at long last. Tremendous energy, tremendous excitement. And by the time we got to that was in the 70s, was the end of it. And then something went wrong. And then it slowly decayed from there, if I can use the word decay, changed. And I'm totally bemused as to what made the change take place.
Money, greedy, business.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Oil catastrophe, all that new liberalism, becoming of globalization, all that. These are all the factors in this generative process.
There's always
there are several generative process going on, actually, and we can look at this.
Well, I hope the youngsters are actually getting on with the job, because something needs to be done.
There was also a time, 90s. Europeans and Westerns were thinking that maybe something good happens in Russia now. Maybe the democratic process is really getting on from there, but all that was an illusion. That's part of the.
No, I'm not saying anymore.
You can see it now.
I'm an old man.
If you can hear me properly, I'm in a vehicle process. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just thought I briefly mentioned that yesterday we were talking about how Bohm was also interested in change of consciousness, and in a way, because of course he, you know, as we know, he was very interested in socialism and those kinds of approaches, but felt that they don't really work. So And I think one way of putting the question is that we have a technological advancement, but we don't have similar advancement in our consciousness and communication. And then the question really is that, if should we ask for a change of consciousness, both individually and socially, in order to be able to handle our technology? That's just an idea. I'm thinking a little bit of organizing a conference along those themes where we could have different people. I mean, a lot of people are making proposals about this, but it's also a question of, if we were not advanced scientifically and technologically, our problems would be much less. And that's why we need to kind of keep up with that. But I won't elaborate it now, but perhaps later on.
Thank you both, Sue and John, for sparking this really interesting discussion. We have, maybe we've got time for one or two questions. Next, we'll go to Niels.
Yeah. Hello. I got interested when you said now. In fact, now is the only thing that is real everywhere at the same time. In the instant now is real for everyone. So, it's not so much a question, but it's actually directing us into, in order to cope with the now in this lateral space, how can we cope with that? We can only, there's no time. There's only the implicate order is the now, ready to move into the next phase of the now, the next now. And I think in terms of complexity, that is the answer to our problem. It will take me a long time to, but that's the fundamentals of it. What I like to say is that I had the opportunity to explore and invent a system that can create that in no time, and in the sense that order comes from sorting things. So in terms of a complex network, if you're thinking about all the branches that is in the network, and if you're thinking about emanating from this point to the entire universe, then you can sort the links in distance. Distance could be either time or other aspects of metrics, if you like. So in that way, this process, sorting process, becomes a vertical, just a single vertical line of branches. And that would give you the complete picture of the possibilities that are and the consequence of those. It has to go into context, but I think this is, and I believe that I've now been studying neuroscience since the lockdown, and I can see, and biology, and I can see this kind of process is what we need to solve these problems. That's in a nutshell, that's how simple it is. But on the background of that, I created a pedestrian model, and we've got all the things of activities and interactions and all the things you are talking about as things in the contextual space, and this was successful in doing airports and underground stations. But that relates to wholeness and implicate order. So I'm saying that the implicate order is sorting the order into an optimal position of least action or least effort, if you like.
Well, thank you for the answer. You lost me in the complexity, but you started with time. The first question.
Yes, there is no time in actually, because the time when you're now is timeless in a sense.
Well, it depends what kind of philosophical point you take.
No, but it operates within time in the wider sphere. The time, the whole thing moves in time. But making sense of it, you do in no time, because you stop it. A bit like the wave function in quantum mechanics. When you've done your calculations, then it's finished and it's stopped. But then you could, from there, you could move on to the next now.
Sir, you understand that your question is quite complex.
Yes, because it solves, as far as I can understand it, it solves the problem of complexity, because it doesn't.
Okay, interesting, but I'm sorry, I have to say that I cannot answer really to that.
No, but that was what came to my mind when you said now. Okay.
All right.
And I think it is, and this resonates with Ian McGilchrist's idea of the split brain.
Yeah. Well, thank you anyway for sharing. Of course, please do share on Sutra so you can continue this discussion on the forum.
Yeah.
We can take one more question maybe from Leila.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this very interesting dialogue.
Leila, could I ask, can I see you?
I'm afraid I'm not well myself.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And I suffer from chronic fatigue, so I'm not well to put on my camera, if that's okay. Maybe another time. Actually, my original question is finding its way through the last 3 or 4 questions or topics that have been raised. I think the previous Niels spoke about the concept of the now, which is very much looked into through meditation. Meditation and the expansion of the moment of the now takes us into the shift in awareness. And I was wondering if we can take this perspective and look at it from Bohm's experience with Krishnamurti. My research in cognitive psychology was on meditation, and I saw how the brain goes as they progress in time practice, how people relate to the positive and negative in the same way. It means going into neutrality. Putting this idea together with the expansion of the now, or the moment of now, one goes into altered states of consciousness. And I was wondering if Basil looked at the Impressionists from that perspective. Was Bohm interested in altered states of consciousness and then merging them with art? Because another example is silk painting. And in silk painting, there are less brush strokes and more creativity that comes when people meditate. It comes from a very different realm with this expansion in time. So I was wondering if Impressionists, along with silk painting, can be also contrasted with altered state of consciousness, emptiness, no movement, into an expanded consciousness that we can develop over time to create creativity, to help our children into breaking away from the screen and this death of imagination into a simple way of helping our children create and develop their sense of empathy into blending with the other and into the universe. Thank you.
I have not really thought about this. My thinking has always been about space, and time is very difficult. But I've not thought about how time and the now comes into art. Thank you for directing my attention to think about it. I didn't really see how it could work there.
Thank you, Basil. I have reflected on it extensively in the last 20 years through my research and application on the retreats I do. And I find that that's the fundamental difference between us and artificial intelligence, is that within the no movement, the brain can, and it has been also proven in on studies on meditation, in the no movement, we can go into the ultimate effective form of existence.
Have you actually experienced this state?
Yes, and it was just experimenting, and it's interesting that Stephen spoke about it a few weeks ago. So I am looking at it through my work and through my leisure on silk painting. I have meditated and then I did some silk painting, which was not coming through me. It was heavenly. So I'm linking that point as well.
Can I have a comment here?
Yes, thank you.
If you think about this now, you know, you can have any moment of now, and basically from any moment of now, you can expand your experience into timeless dimensions if you want, and you might find yourself in like a, say, flow experience.
Yes, that's my point. Absolutely.
Okay, that's your point exactly.
Absolutely, right. Yeah. I agree with you.
Those are one of the most creative moments in our lives. When you're flow, when things flow, you know, time disappears. Nothing means really anything. Everything is as good as things could possibly be. You do what you love. You are dwelt there. Everything is great.
Absolutely.
Of course, I don't know what the neuroscientists can do, but if they measure your brains during the flow moments, you might get interesting.
I think there is some research, and
there is this. Let me show you. You might know this guy. This hard to pronounce. Csikszentmihalyi.
Oh yes, he is creativity. Yes.
He's the guru of the flow, but he's also written about creativity. This is a very interesting book.
Yes, absolutely. Now I've seen his work in the 90s, but I agree with you. But our 2 points are really merging. But I was wondering if Bohm reflected on the altered states of consciousness with Krishnamurti and linked it back to creativity and meditation, because now science have looked at the prefrontal cortex and measured its activity during meditation. So the importance of the prefrontal going into neutrality and reaching this highest peak of an altered state of consciousness is very interesting to link back to painting, and maybe the awakening of the imagination that we need so much for our children. But thank you so much for your
thank you. Very complex question. I think that Paavo and
time is
Basil, no,
yes,
Christian will do very well.
Yeah, but we can, we can also discuss those later. I guess with James, we realized that our time is getting there, and we'll be continuing in roughly 2 weeks with, and then it'll be Petteri's task to find out what philosophy meant in the Bohm-Hailey interaction, and in some ways probably continuing this today's discussion, but I'm sure Petter will come up with some questions for Basil, and this way we can keep going. But anyway, so thanks for my part, and maybe James, you can.
Of course. Well, Petteri, do you have anything to leave us with today as well?
Do I have anything?
Just any final words to close the session?
How many hours you have?
About less than.
I haven't even started yet. Yeah. Let me say this. Just to remind you that what we are dealing with here. This is a philosophy book, The Philosophy of Creativity by Eliot Samuel Paul and Scott Barry Kaufman. New essays are not that old.
Sorry, could you hold the authors up, please, Petteri?
Yeah, just, yeah.
Author, a bit higher, higher. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So here it is. There is little that shapes the human experience as profoundly and pervasively as creativity. Creativity drives progress in every human endeavor, from the arts to the sciences, business and technology and so on. We celebrate and honor people for their creativity in identifying eminent individuals as well as entire cultures and societies in terms of their creative achievements. Creativity is the vehicle of self-expression and part of what makes us who we are. One might therefore expect creativity to be a major topic in philosophy, especially since it raises such a wealth of interesting philosophical questions, as we will soon see. A little expert, but interesting words. Don't you think? Yeah. You can read basically all that from Bohm's book, but if you're interested in these questions, this book also works as a very good general introduction to Bohm's thinking, and also I'm sure Hailey's thinking as well.
Never seen that book. Anyway, can I just finally say, because I've got to go now, thank you for allowing me to interrupt you.
Would you do so?
No, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Paavo, Petteri, and surprise special guest Basil. It's really been a wonderful discussion, all of us, and of course, thank you all to everyone who contributed, from the participants, whether from your questions through the chat or just by being here and listening to us. Before we go, I'd just like to remind everyone of our upcoming sessions for this series. As Paavo mentioned, we will be taking a break next weekend, but we will be continuing on August the 20th, where we will have Basil and Petteri again talking about the role of philosophy in Bohm and Hailey's research in physics. And finally, on Sunday, we will have William Seeger talking to us about consciousness, Bohm, and the quest for intelligibility. Until then, feel free to contact us on our website or email directly. Eleanor@paricenter.com is the best place to contact us. In the meantime, we'll see you again soon here at the Pori Center. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.